On behalf of the Winnipeg Human Rights Committee, I want to thank you for joining and welcome to this virtual discussion of the films that we watched. My name is Jennifer Cheho, and I'm the chair of the Winnipeg Human Rights Committee. Before starting this session, I'd like to do a land acknowledgement, and because everyone is from different areas and regions, I think, Frank, you're the only one from another region right now. I invite you to think of and acknowledge in your mind the land you are currently on. I'd like to acknowledge that I live and work in Treaty 1 territory and that the land is the traditional territory of the original lands of Anishinaabe, Cree, Oji-Cree, Dakota, and Dene peoples, and on the homeland of the Métis Nation. I'm dedicated to ensuring that the spirit of reconciliation and Treaty 1 is honored and respected. I respect the treaties that were made on these territories. I acknowledge the harms and mistakes of the past, and I dedicate myself to move forward in partnership with Indigenous communities in a spirit of reconciliation and collaboration. Thank you very much. So I hope everyone has enjoyed the short films showcased and are ready to share your thoughts on them. We have two guests joining us this evening, and I'd like to invite them to meet you. Our first guest is Marian Haldoun. Marian Haldoun has served as the PSAC Regional Executive Vice President, Prairie Region since 2012. For over 25 years, Marian has held several positions, including local executive positions with Agriculture Union, Local 40022, National Human Rights Director, and later Regional Vice President of the Saskatchewan with the Agricultural Union, PSAC Vice President to the Saskatchewan Federation of Labor, and several positions on the Prairie Regional Council. As the CFIA member, she was elected to the CFIA bargaining team for 3 rounds. Marian is a graduate of the PSAC's Union Development Program and the Canadian Labour Congress Labour College of Canada, and she holds a Labour Studies diploma from the University of Saskatchewan. Her community activism includes political action at the municipal, provincial, and federal level, and volunteering on the Saskatoon United Way Board of Directors as a Labour representative with the Saskatchewan Asbestos Disease Awareness Organization, and with NASHI, N-A-S-H-I, which is a registered charity raising awareness of human trafficking locally and abroad. And as REVP, Marian now represents over 27,000 members in Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba in over 30 plus bargaining units. I'm going to invite Marian to say a few words. Welcome, Marian. Thanks for joining us.
Perfect. Thank you, Jen. And I'm going to apologize to everyone, but I'm going to be turning my camera off in between. I seem to be having some Wi-Fi issues the last few days, and it gets really garbled, but and hopefully I don't lose you like has happened to me a couple of meetings today where I got dropped. As much as this is a new way of doing things, I actually got to participate, which sometimes is really difficult with travel and schedules when you're doing in-person events. And, I look forward. I did have a few aha moments during some of the films. So I look forward to that discussion. But, just because we're in quarantine and just because we're in the middle of a pandemic, doesn't mean that all the other work stops. So, again, I want to thank the committee for finding a way to continue having these discussions and doing the work that we need to be doing. So thank you for the invitation.
Thank you, Marian. And the next person is Frank Septel, who is Frank works as a national communications representative for the Machinists Union, where he is responsible for communications and communications training across Canada. Prior to joining the Machinists in 1999, Frank worked for Ontario New Democratic Party caucus at Queen's Park for 8 years. He is also the former Ontario Federation of Labor Vice President representing workers of color. He is also involved in numerous human rights and social justice issues and movements. Frank is also involved in Our Times Magazine, Toronto Workers' History Project, Committee of Progressive Pakistani Canadians, and the Coalition of Black Trade Unionists. And last but not least, Frank is also the founder of The Cliff. There's an informative interview on Frank and on the Cliff website, which was conducted in July of this year. So I would invite you to check it out. And over to you, Frank, for a few words. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Jennifer. And well, firstly, thanks to you and the committee for organizing the screening, but particularly for organizing this particular discussion after the screening. And that was the whole point of Cliff. When and yes, I'm the founder. You know, it sounds very highfalutin, but firstly, I acknowledge that there's no way I could do this alone. It always takes the metaphorical village to do something like this, especially as it's a national endeavor. But the whole point behind Cliff was not only to show films, and films that you wouldn't be able to see anywhere else. The point was to have discussion and then kind of widen our knowledge. And even if we differ with people who we're discussing with, I mean, that's called a dialectical discourse. People with different points of view, after discussion, having gone away, both having learned, both having widened their knowledge. So that's the point of Cliff, and I'm so glad to see that you're actually putting that into practice. So thank you, and by the way, thank you all for taking the time out of your schedule to watch the films and then to be here for the discussion. So solidarity.
Thank you very much. And yeah, I forgot to say thank you, Marian, for taking this time too on your busy schedule to join us. And I'm so glad that it's you know, being done virtually so that you can join us via the Zoom here. And also Frank, to just acknowledge and thank you for joining us from all the way from Ontario. So thank you. So, okay, so I'm going to just remind, I don't think I mentioned it, but this session is being recorded. So if anybody on the call or on camera here is, I would prefer not to have your photo, your image shared or your voices shared, please let us know so that we will make sure that you, your voices and your faces are not being shared, okay? So please let us know, or just turn off your video if you prefer to. So, okay, so let's do this. So this is the first time we're doing this. Usually when I did the Cliff showing, we usually had, you know, in paper form, question and answers, certain questions that we asked that's shared within Cliff. So now it's a free form. Two questions that I have come up with, or the committee has come up with, is one to ask which one of the films you like the most, and the other question is which one has the most impact on you. And it's just voluntary, volunteer, whoever wants to speak, tell us which film you like the most and what kind of impact it had on you. So I will open the floor to you, and let's discuss it.
If no one answers, I'm going to point to somebody. I'm going to pick you out.
The one I liked the most was the second one, which was like the animated one. Just because it was like, I don't know, it was everything. Like it was very unique. I don't know.
Thank you, Calvin. And that's the one that I didn't quite understand too much.
I didn't completely understand it either, but I enjoyed it.
Wonderful. Thank you. Okay, Frank, it's your job to point.
So can I just say that I appreciate, because I didn't quite get that one either, and I thought I missed something. so I do appreciate hearing that it wasn't like I need to go back and watch it again, because you know I just kind of kept on going because I wanted to get through it all before this one, but I'm like, I think I missed something.
You could actually watch it. You can actually go back and watch it for the next 24 hours. You can go back and watch that film.
Yeah. I could only get like, she works at the call center. There are 3 people, and then at the end, she just went to hell.
Yeah, I think it's just kind of the idea of she's stuck in this like dead-end job that she hates, and I didn't really get the part at the end, to be honest. maybe going to hell was like a better alternative than being stuck in that job she was working.
Yeah, like some people say they're stuck in the dungeon space at home and whatever when they're working from home, right? I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What I got out of it was kind of a universality to it. I think all of us have had those jobs where we feel, I'm never going to get out of here. I am never, ever, ever going to get out of here. Especially when I was young, the kind of jobs that younger people have to take, the banality, the routine, the crap pay, the crap working conditions, and always the gaze, the view, people surveilling you. Some people are stuck in those jobs right now, and it just seems like there's no escape. And even hell is an escape compared to the job. That's what I got out of it. I'm not saying that's what the filmmaker intended.
And there's no right or wrong answer. It's just everybody has a different opinion, what you get out of watching the movies, right? Or the films. So yeah. Anybody else?
Frank, just to kind of continue on what you said about, nowadays with the basically precarious work, whether it's call centers and we all work those jobs. I started off in a family grocery store for minimum wage. But I always knew I had options to get out, versus today it's become the norm. And, even at one point, the finance minister telling, young workers in Canada that you better get used to it because this is going to be your reality of having to work 2 and 3 jobs, which, I didn't experience. And, the whole idea of being able to work one job and have a quality of life seems to have gone out the window.
It's even worse than that today. If I can just jump in there, it's on top of getting the crap pay and the crap working conditions. In the pandemic, you were forced to work. Then all of a sudden you became a frontline hero. You got a pay raise, and then that raise is now just gone. So you're back to the old crap, and people are still going, oh yeah, frontline heroes, frontline heroes. Well, I tell you what, we can be heroes if we pay them better. So yeah, I mean, it's all really, there's so much to it. And I say, I use that word, there's a universality. And every one of the films that we've chosen and that we've chosen for the last 12 years really has some element that has touched the board members' hearts or their experiences or their minds and has made us think. So I suspect that all of these, if you didn't nod off while watching them, all of them spoke to us in some way. And I guess the advantage that I have is that I literally watch hundreds of these films through the submission process. We watched 834 this year to get it down to the 18. But when we go through this, we are forced to think about why we like them or why we dislike them. So that forces a kind of analysis and a very quick analysis. So if you don't feel comfortable or you don't know why you like or dislike the film, that's perfectly understandable. It's kind of like expecting you to run a marathon just like that, whereas somebody who's already running marathons every day, it's no big deal. But I encourage you to watch the films again and tune into some of the other screenings. If you go to our website, you'll see a URL called watch.eventive.org/cliff2020. We have a whole list of every single screening going on right now. Pardon me. So you'll get to see, and I would recommend another film. It happens to be my particular favorite, but it's a film by itself. It's a screening by itself. It's called The Ballad of John Henry. So I don't know how many of you know the song, The Ballad of John Henry. I grew up with it, fabulous song. But this film actually takes us and discovers who the real John Henry is, which was not known before. So it's kind of cool. So I encourage you to go and find that film. And it's one that just shows you so many conditions of the American South during slavery, during the Jim Crow era, and even today. but I'm talking too much. I want to hear some more of why you liked certain films, or which films you liked, and possibly why.
No, it's all good, Frank. Thanks for sharing those information. So I see Ruby has joined us. Welcome, Ruby, all the way from British Columbia. I love you. Thanks for joining us. Deb, welcome, Deb. And also, hi, two Debs, Deb Sabuya and Debbie. So we were asking, for those who just joined us, which film did you like the most, and what kind of impact have you experienced, or how did it impact you, the movies that you've watched?
Hi, Jen, it's Ruby. Thank you so much for having this Cliff Night. I'm so happy that you continue to have this offered for our members. I really enjoyed the movies. The one that resonates most would be the female rickshaw driver, because she's a single mom like me, supporting her family. And she sounds like a really strong, well-rounded person, doing a good job with her family. So thanks for picking that one. Timigwech, all my relations.
Thank you. Thanks. I'm glad you enjoyed it. And there are so many of them, and just unfortunately, we can't do too long of a, you know what it's like when you do a, too long of a session, people are not going to join us, right? So thank you, Ruby. Anybody else would like to share your thoughts on the movies that you watched? I can also share my own experience about there's several of them that I really like. The first one was filmed in Malaysia, and for those of you who know, I'm actually partly Malaysian, so it brings back memories. The accent, every word was said in the movie, I could understand it, so it was a nice feeling. And also with the Chinese background, I could totally relate to how the boys, with the introduction there, that Chinese families prefer boys than girls. I don't think my family is doing that, but I know the background of it. And the thing that I can relate to is with regards to boys and girls. For us, the boys, so we've got two boys, my sister and myself. So tradition is that, or culture is that, my parents would stay with the boys and not the girls. But I don't recall being treated unfairly or unequal. They love us all. They love us. We get everything. It's just responsibility of who's going to take care of the parents would be the boys in the family. So therefore, my parents lived with my brothers for the longest time until they got to they transferred to a care home in BC. That's the one thing that I could relate to that with first film. And the second one that impacted me too is how the Gathering Circle one. It's really funny because I have this book here that was given to me by my dear wife. It's called One Drum, and in this book, this is a really nice book, and it's not a story book. It's a very inspirational book. Talks about stories and ceremonies for a planet, and how they talked about the 7 teachings, grandfather's teaching, humility, courage, honesty, truth. It really resonates with me because as soon as I heard that, I'm like, what? And so this book I carry with me, and I recommend and suggest that everybody, if you have a chance, get a copy of this, and you can just turn to any page, anytime, any day, whenever. There's always the right page for you, and it's very inspirational. How they, and the fact that they all got volunteers, over 400 people from the steel workers, I believe it was, who worked together and helped them build that beautiful, beautiful infrastructure. So yeah, so that's for me to share at the moment.
Jan, it's Debbie here.
Hi.
Can you hear me?
Yeah,
Hi. Yeah, no, I agree. I really, really enjoyed that second film. I guess for me, it kind of made me feel like, it was really nice to see how people got together and they're really trying to make a change and, make further steps for the truth and reconciliation. I have a lot of family that are Indigenous, and you know, I hear a lot. I've learned and I've heard so many stories, and I'm just really fascinated about that topic. So that I just, because I have a personal connection, and I'm hoping someday that everything will be resolved. But I don't know if I'll be around for that. But it just kind of gives you hope. That's how I felt. I felt it was a feel-good film. And the other one I really enjoyed was The Veterinarian. I almost cried. Oh my gosh. That's another film that I could really relate to, because I do have a love for dogs, a love for animals, and just listening to the vet, you know, when she talked about how she had to euthanize 3 animals in one day, and it really kind of stops and makes you think about, you know, like when I take my dog to the vet, I don't think, oh, you know, did they euthanize some animals before I walked in? But I mean, that really does take a toll on someone's mental well-being, right? And it just kind of makes me more aware and appreciative of my vet, and just people in general, their jobs. Like, I mean, I'm sure there's other types of occupations that people have to make tough choices, and yeah, and they have their, you know, their struggles there, right? And so we just, I guess, need to be more kind to people, and before we speak and things like that. So those are my 2 favorites.
You're on mute again.
Sorry, I was saying, Debs, for thanks for sharing, because I know at the end of that how they gave the credit, and they also talked about the other workers at the vet's office, right? So you're right, it's not just sometimes you just don't think about things like that.
I just wanted to say a couple of things. So one about Gathering Place, and I think unanimously among the board of directors when we were screening the films or vetting the films, unanimously we picked that one because it wasn't only about Indigenous people. It was about the collective decision making and the whole notion of that circle, right? It's a very critical thing in the various Indigenous communities. But also when they got together, they considered so many things, not only including the work, but the people who did it, the workers. So that was a deep consideration. It almost gets missed, but we chose it because it was a subtle thing, but it was definitely there. It included the workers doing part of the project. And the other, pardon me, I have this chest cold. Not COVID, not COVID. Animal calling really illustrates one of the key goals of the film festival, and that's to look at every single person doing work as a worker. Who would have actually thought of a veterinarian as a worker? But you actually get to see her point of view, what she lives day in and day out, the mental stresses. I'd never really thought about that. I figured if I were a veterinarian, you know, I would do the job, whatever the case may be. But this really took me to the interior life of a veterinarian. And I remember I actually wrote a paper before the festival on how to create a festival. And the point of it was to see a bank manager and understand what that bank manager has to go through as a worker. We, in our world, in our universe, including myself, look at them as those assholes. They're trying to screw us. They're trying to, you know, oppress us, but they're also workers, right? So if we can get to a common understanding of everyone who works as a worker, and if we can start that outward process, perhaps they can start looking at us as workers. And perhaps there's a greater understanding, and perhaps there's more peace in our working lives.
Thank you, Frank, for sharing that. I'm curious to hear what people's thoughts are on we're unions, we're organizing this event. I'm trying to see what people's thoughts are about that organizing film, the one for the unionization. Is there anybody who might, maybe Marion's nodding. Yeah, I wonder if anybody wants to talk about that.
I mean, it was interesting. I didn't. I was thinking after I watched it that I didn't catch a date of when it was filmed. I wasn't paying attention to that. But you know, you look at what's happening in our world today, and it, you know, it's like we haven't moved forward on anything. Whether it's on, you know, unionizing, union busting, racism, classism, you know, it's as much as we think we've moved ahead, you kind of go, really, how much have we, you know, have we stemmed the tide? I hope, but yeah, that was interesting, and it really, the life of an organizer is it's as I've said before, they're a very special breed of person that it is not something that me as a union activist could be effective at. So, you know, kudos to them for the work they do.
Thank you, Marianne.
Hi, Jen, it's Deanna.
Hi,
I
Deanna.
liked that film actually because it takes a lot of work to organize anything. Right now, I'm in the process of building a volunteer organization, and it's a lot of work to organize people and get people interested. I'm not sure how the background of PSAC was. I'm sure it was quite similar, but like people working for minuscule amounts, being abused by their employers and facing racism and other discrimination. It kind of resonated with me because like these people are working so many hours and a lot of them can't commit because of the employer's demands to work in like such long hours and degrading conditions. And so, yeah.
Thanks, Deanna. And some of them too were working more than one job. And, you know, that hours that they're working is just kind of, you know, it just that also reminds me of when I first came to Canada, where I was working more than one job, and the hours, you know, I had a young child then, and it still exists, like Marianne said, like things, not particularly this one here, but it's just like I came here over 30 years ago, and same situation where new immigrants who are new to the country, and even with their own certification, they can't really get the job what they qualify for because of the different accreditation here in Canada. So working more than one job, having to look after the family, young members, and so forth, it's just a struggle, and it's ongoing struggle for even Canadian new immigrants arriving to this country, right? And yes, and it's not easy to organize, even with committees organizing members to attend meetings and so forth. It's the same kind of idea, right? So yeah.
It's Deb in Vancouver.
Hello, Deb.
Hi. Thanks for opening this up to all of Canada. That was really appreciated. And for people who are retired, this is kind of cool to be reconnected back into the union. I enjoyed all of the films with the exception of the one that was the drawing film. I didn't totally understand that one. I think it was the second one. But I really identified or I really enjoyed the circle one. I thought that had real, as has been said. And I also really liked the organizing film because of the fact that it reminds us that there's still lots of work to be done around organizing workers, and particularly in the US, and they have draconian labor laws that bar even organizing at all of some sectors. So that to me is just, it's mind-boggling that they're so anti-union there. I enjoyed the little boy who wanted to be a policeman and have a car and arrest thieves. I thought that it was really cool that that you selected a film that was about a worker who was young, I think he said grade 3, on his summer vacation. So young workers, but that he also talked about what he wanted to do in the future, and to go from being a shepherd to being a policeman seemed like, in my mind, a very long, arduous task. But in his mind, it wasn't hard at all. And I just thought, go for the enthusiasm of youth and not knowing the barriers that are in your way. So I really enjoyed all of the films, with the exception of that one, which I really don't totally understand. But that's okay. I'm old.
Thanks, Deb. But you know what? Yeah, one has to be under 25 to understand it, I think. Calvin, there you see on the screen, Calvin like that. So Calvin, any feedback on that?
I didn't quite understand it either, but I don't know. I thought it was interesting.
Thank you. And it was also directed by a 13-year-old boy. So that was really cool. And Frank, did you want to say something to enlighten us?
The film about the young boy, Sirach, was what stuck with me was, so I appreciated what you just said, Deb, that it's, he's talking about his own future. So he's a worker now, a young worker as it were, but he's also thinking about the future. But what really kind of penetrated my consciousness was the fact that all over the world, I was born and raised in Pakistan, and child workers are not unusual at all. In fact, they're quite the norm. So it just, again, I talked about universality. So that film was universal for me in terms of, in many parts of the world, there are kids who are working. And in some cases, I mean, in this case, he loved his job. He loved what he did. By the way, he wrote and directed the film as well. But there are young workers, young kids who are forced to work. And in many of the years that we've screened films, we invariably show kids who are forced to work. And that's just, that's just tragic in a way. And I understand that in farm country, that's just what people do. Right? Kids help out. So I understand some of those exigencies, but it made me sad in a way. The universality, not the film itself, it just provoked so much thought in my mind. And in terms of Birth of a Union, the film about the organizing, the footage was shot in the 70s. But what was also very interesting to me, and again, being a person of color, being involved in many organizing drives, and also, as many of you are plugged into the world of workers and the world of precarious workers. And I spoke earlier about the frontline workers in the pandemic, the grocery store clerks, the people who are dealing with the clients who are paid crap wages, who are forced to work. Almost all of those are workers of color. They are people from, new to the country, people with no privilege or very little privilege at all. But that film is so optimistic, so hopeful. It says that if you can get together, if you can work together as a team, you will succeed, you will win, and you will be able to have a voice. So although it reminded me of some bad things, the overall thing was, working together, solidarity. That really is, what solidarity is all about.
Thanks, Frank. The other one that I want to talk about is the taxi driver one. So he's been here, for over 40 years, had his business, and all of a sudden Uber came in and he didn't have a job anymore. He lost his car, and that's heartbreaking as well. Like, after having been here for 40 years, and he also had his own business, from pizza delivery guy to having his own driving school. That one too is disturbing, I would say.
I completely understand that one because like they didn't really explain why he doesn't have a job anymore. Because like my understanding was like he voluntarily stopped driving taxi and then he worked as a driving instructor. And they never explained why he stopped working as a driving instructor. So I just found like the film didn't really like it kind of left a lot of loose ends. So I don't really know what to make of it because there was some information missing. But I did enjoy the film nonetheless.
Hi, it's Deanna. Yeah, that one gave me a lot of questions too. I didn't really get it. Like, did he lose his job because he was laid off, or was he fired, or was it because of the business taking over? Or, like, why couldn't they rehire him? I mean, it was just really kind of disturbing in a way. So thanks.
It made me wonder if there were health reasons why he could no longer drive. And maybe that's because of my own family situation where my father had to give up his license because of dementia. So I didn't know, seemed young, but I didn't know if possibly there was some of that. I read that into it maybe because of my own life experience. I wasn't sure why he would have to give up as a driving instructor because I'm not sure how Uber coming in changes driving instructors necessarily. I did like that film because of the daughter paying homage and to her father and to the years that he worked. So it was an acknowledgement of the sacrifices that he made coming in as an immigrant. Everybody just was the pizza guy. That was just your job. If you were from a certain country, you became the pizza guy. To how he had worked to make a better life for his family. And then I lived in Toronto when the cabbies were being killed, and that brought back that to me about the whole fear factor of people being shot for the work that they do. And so I thought that was it's an industry that we don't talk a lot about, I think, in the union movement necessarily. And I like that these films all had jobs that were not what you typically think of as being a worker, like the vet, like the rickshaw driver. You don't think of those people as being quote unquote workers necessarily always in our society.
Thank you.
If I could say, in terms of the film The Car, about the taxi driver, I just thought it was such a loving portrait of her father, and it reminded me in our very first year in 2009. There was a young filmmaker from BC, from Vancouver, who took a camera and she followed her father around, and he was a bus driver. And I'll tell you what, it was a terrible film in terms of the production values, but the fact that she took her camera and she followed her father as a worker was just so fabulous. And I thought that might inspire other people to take up their cameras and follow their parents who are workers and try to understand the nature of their work and what their challenges are. So for that reason, I really, really like these kinds of films, when children take up their cameras and they record and document and interview their own parents.
Thanks, Frank.
Yeah, can I just add something?
Of course, yeah, go ahead.
Is my sound okay? Because I'm just not sure if I'm having issues. So sound is good. Okay.
It's
you know what?
You're breaking. Your voice is breaking.
Okay, let's do that because it's like I cannot figure this out. I guess two things. I mean, I will say that out of all of them, the rickshaw driver one resonated the most. And I say that because I have had the unbelievable privilege of going to Bangladesh twice to work with garment workers. and, you know, both times in DACA. And, you know, I recognize the river, and I, you know, like every scene there, I've literally stood in the middle of that. And, you know, part of the work that we were doing with the Social Justice Fund, you know, it was specific to you know, factory workers in the ready-made garment sector. You know, and you heard her say, well, you can't live on those wages, and you can't. And the last time I was there, we were a very small group, and we actually spent 2 evenings in their homes, which is basically a room, with shared kitchens and, you know, outhouses. And so when I heard her talking, it's like I could just, I've been all those places. I saw the shacks where the rickshaw drivers, the men sleep. And then I started thinking, I don't remember seeing any women doing it. But they have some of the strongest women. You know, they keep saying, oh, thank you, you know, you're such an inspiration to us. We're nowhere near these women. Like, their lives are threatened. A colleague was murdered for organizing a union. They were fired. They were beaten. And they still go back and organize. And when you look at them, and I remember talking to one of them saying, why do you do this? Well, for my children. I do this for my children. Somebody has to do it. And I could see the same spirit in her. Like, I really, that one just absolutely got me. And I think it was a really good portrayal of it. And, you know, some people look at that and say, oh, that poor woman. I look at that and say, I wish I could be more like her.
Thanks, Marion. Yeah, I thought about the, after watching it too, I thought, geez, I had a quiet moment there thinking, oh my God, like, cause you know how she's like hoping to save up, and she's working so hard, and such hard work for her, like thinking of giving the children education, wanting to buy a car. And here I was thinking, you know, we're so fortunate, as much as we, you know, the public servants and like us, we still, during this COVID-19 situation, we're still having our jobs. And just thinking, how lucky am I to afford things that I, you know, and I sort of regretted it. I'm like, oh my God, like I wish, like, you know, spending money on kitchen gadgets and things that I don't even need, like, you know, or buy a kitchen gadget and figure out how to cook and what to cook. Like, look at her, she's working so hard. It's just, I had a moment there of like, almost like a regret, and just thinking, reflecting on how poorly this woman is living, having to work so hard. Yeah, it's very inspirational watching her working so hard, and yeah, she looks so strong and just strong-willed. It's very powerful. So I'm looking at the time is 8:20 in Manitoba and 9:20 in Ontario and 6:20 in BC. So you know, I'm just going to invite anybody else who would like to maybe say a few words. This has been a really great session. Oh, hi, Ruby. Would you like to speak?
Yes, I
Thank
wanted
you.
to share. I wanted to share about the unionizing film. The unionizers were very personable. Um, and something I've come across recently in BC is other workers who are interested in unionizing, and I didn't have the basic knowledge to give them to encourage them. I did contact a unionizer in PSAC, but I would really like to have some of the basic information. An example is I heard the PSAC unionizer say that the employer is not even supposed to talk to you about unionizing, much less threaten the workers if they sign a union card, sign up to be in a union. Basic things like that. I'd really like to learn more about that, so I could be part of bringing more people into the union. I'd like more knowledge because what I have right now, what I've learned is just part of being a union, and I want to bring more people in. I just want to learn how to do that. And I know Deb used to be involved in education. Maybe she'd have some tips there, but I wanted to bring that up. Yeah, because the one area where I've heard about there being no unions is in First Nations communities, in the like in the band offices. If we could give them information on unionizing, that would be wonderful for them to have the strength of fellow workers and organizers and leaders and people who've been through that struggle. Yeah, so that's what's on my mind, and I'm really happy to see that film that you guys picked for this clip. Thanks.
I can't help but put my old hat on, jump in and say, Ruby, if you connect with Deanna and just mention to her about maybe doing a course, an education course that touches on what our workers need to know to help organize unorganized. I know she'd be happy to hear from you, and I will send her a quick note just to say that it came up on this topic tonight, just so she's got a heads up, but please do contact her.
Thank you. Thanks, Deb, and thanks, Ruby. And Ruby, just so everybody knows, Ruby has a very bad reputation. And her reputation is, Ruby? She is always working. Ruby Langen is always working, and not for herself, but for the betterment of, just like what she did now, always working. How do I encourage people to be unionized? How do I organize people? And just like she just too hardworking. Thank you, Ruby, for all that you've done or are doing.
Thanks, Jen. I learned a lot from you too, so it's partly you.
So funny. Okay, so does anybody have anything else that you would like to talk before we actually disconnect? Frank, are you talking? You have to unmute.
Pardon me. I have something to show, but it's only for Jennifer. I don't know if you can, oh no, you can't see it, can you? Oops, let me see if I can stand.
Some sort of food?
It's a fish curry powder.
Yeah.
That I bought from Penang when I was there.
Nice. Have you tried it yet?
I've tried many versions. I brought it back a whole bunch of food. I went twice, and I love Penang, love Malaysia.
Very nice. Very nice. That's awesome. So, well, we won't know for sure because you haven't shared it. So maybe next time when you come to Winnipeg or BC, whomever, just connect with one of us and we'll get together and you can organize some sort of a cooking.
I'm not planning on sharing that with anybody, FYI.
Wow. Well, Calvin, just for everybody's information, Calvin's a really good cook. So he is my cooking partner in Winnipeg. So I wanted to take this moment to thank everyone for taking this time to join us. This has been a really good discussion. And I wanted to thank Frank for, the Cliff, finding Cliff and, having all these beautiful, nice films that are very inspirational for us to be able to share every year. PSAC has been a host for several years now. And, we try to spread the word for our PSAC regions across Canada, and hopefully next year, then they'll be able to organize or hosting some sort of a Cliff event all across Canada. And thanks, Marian, for taking your time to join us. BC people, I love you. What else did I want to say? I think that's about it. So this is really great. Yeah. Bye, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. Take
Thanks
care.
for inviting me. Take care. Nice
Take care.
meeting you all.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.